Hi, good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining me. And a lot of people don't understand why I keep on talking about COVID, especially in highly vaccinated regions. And it's because I anticipated there was a problem from 2022. And you have to understand. So I'll take you back to what my thoughts were at the time, because I'd been doing a lot of research on COVID and I was very concerned with the Delta wave. And then in December, Omicron hit. And at the time, one of the first things that I'd noticed was that a proportion of the vaccinated got Omicron. And so you may think to yourself, well, that's no big deal, but it hit a point that I thought at the time was very relevant because this was the boosted population. And I thought, hold on, this looks as though what I was anticipating, which was an alteration in terms of their mucosal immunity, was occurring. Now, when we hit January and February of 2022, I had started to down tools looking at the research on COVID because I thought, well, if you have COVID sweep the whole world, whether or not they're vaccinated or unvaccinated, that's it. Because then you've got herd immunity. And just so that you understand where I'm coming from, I've got some slides together to help you to explain or remind you of the science at that time or the science around what happens with regards to COVID. And it's pretty straightforward. Just remember the basic rules. Airway in this region here, then it replicates and it continues to spread down into the lungs, up into the sinuses, or out to other people. And I've always said that the huge challenge is how do you prevent the virus with the spike protein from getting into the systemic circulation. This is everything you have to understand. If the virus is just concentrated in the upper airways, it can cause some issues, but no big deal compared to what happens when it gets inside the systemic circulation and triggers the immune system there. And so, this is fundamentally where I focus with regards to the virus. It's not about whether or not people have a sniffle or if they don't. For me, everything is about what occurs when the virus breaks through mucosal immunity. Depending on their immune priming status will determine what can happen after that. So let's follow along again from the period in terms of early 2022. As I said, Omicron spread everywhere. It was supposed to be the end of the pandemic. Because remember, you were told that hybrid immunity was more sophisticated than natural immunity. So if hybrid immunity was getting the infection anyway, that's it, done. Natural immunity, done. The end of the pandemic. The time we reached May and June, I knew something was definitely wrong. And just so that I remind you, because nobody talks about these things anymore, luckily there are some people who won't let it go. Truthfully, they are focused on it from the long COVID point of view, but the principles are still the same. And what they've got here is this is from pmc19.com. They were looking at daily infections based on wastewater estimates. And so this is up to date to today. And so you can see all the way from 2020 over here, the peak in 2020 here. This was Delta in 2021. This was Omicron in 2022. When it came down, this should have been it. But you can see it started to rise again, came down, rose again, came down. And this is each variant sweeping through the United States in this case. And what you will notice is that the baseline infection point is not coming down. Compare it to 2020 and 2021. Something is wrong here. It means a cohort of people continually seem to be infected. And this is the point. This is what, as I said, if you understand the implications, you will see why this is so very important. So the principles are simple. When you get an infection, the virus infects these cells, it triggers an immune response. The immune response, interestingly, is primarily T cell at the mucosal area, meaning that when the difference between the T and the B cells produce lots of antibodies. The T cells don't bother to target the virus directly, they just destroy the cells that are infected. So the T cells are exceptionally important for clearing up virus. If you have a T cell response that is too focused, it will not be as effective at clearing up virally infected cells. This seems to be what is driving the ongoing circulation. So when you come across people who would say no big deal, I can guarantee you that nobody expected, including myself, that after Omicron in early 2022, this should have stopped. I guarantee you they thought so too. So we are now in an area that nobody anticipated. And this is now what I'm flagging about, because I'm saying, hold on, we've got a problem here. If you've got a population who is highly vaccinated and are still circulating the virus, this, in my view, represents a serious risk. It was not supposed to happen. Nobody anticipated it happening. This is not the same as just influenza strains going out. It's really important. COVID is not influenza. Everything indicates about the pathophysiology, mortality. This is way more lethal than influenza. It's not the same, and you shouldn't be treating it the same. You should be trying to understand, where is this virus different? And just a reminder, what it looks like. What we're seeing here, nobody expected. I guarantee you, if you go back to 2021 and ask them, did they expect to see these ongoing surges? These are not even following seasonal patterns. This could be in the summer sometimes. This is just unprecedented. Okay. And this is the pattern that we're seeing in highly vaccinated regions. Now, people will say, well, the same thing is happening in low vaccinated regions. And I say, you got to show me the evidence of that, because I don't see how in low vaccinated regions this could occur based on the extrapolation of the science. Now, what do I mean by the extrapolation of the science? Follow along again. This is my analysis, and again, this is my analysis of it. The mucosal immune system is a very sophisticated immune barrier. There are multiple levels. Mucus at the top, cilia sweeping the virus away. Even if the virus infects a cell, it still has to break through a whole defense line of immune cells ready to target anything that gets through it. And once this mucosal immune system has been trained by exposure to the virus, it is extremely effective. So when we think of natural immunity, you have to remember as well, there's a big difference between what happens in natural immunity. And I have to find the slide here for you. I've got some slides, lots of slides as usual. So I have to find hopefully the right slide for you to be able to understand what I'm talking about. But when we think about how the virus is and what it does, the virus has multiple proteins on it. It's not just a spike protein, membrane protein, envelope protein. Inside there's nucleocapsid protein, there are ORF proteins. So natural immunity is extremely broad, and it takes all of them into consideration. So it's not just targeting the spike. And actually, interestingly, when you look at the natural response, it targets quite heavily ORF, the open reading frame proteins, which are produced when the virus infects a cell. And so the T cells must be targeting virally infected cells and destroying them as soon as they start to make these open reading frame proteins. This doesn't seem to be the same with the spike protein, because if it is targeting a specific spike protein and it changes the Omicron variant, it is not as effective. And this is why we're having ongoing circulation. Now, added to that, IgG4, where we now know, now again, people will argue about this, but the evidence is pretty clear. Once you've gone beyond the second dose and you start to give booster doses, there is a significant increase in IgG4, which is the immune tolerant spike, our immune tolerant antibody. We're talking about 38 times higher than normal. So when you combine the fact that in vaccinated regions, the population is producing a tolerant antibody, and it is too targeted to the original variant of the spike protein, you then have a situation where the mucosal immunity doesn't seem to be responding effectively. And we can argue about whether or not it is. My point is, and just in case there are some people who are arguing about it, my point is, you've got to tell me that this is what you expected. I'm telling you, this is not normal. This is not what should have happened. We should have had a wipeout, especially in highly vaccinated regions, and maybe tiny little surges in each winter period. Maybe you could argue that that's as much as I'd give, but not this. And so we have a situation that is not going away. So now let's get to the bit that really upsets people. And so let me explain again so you understand my thinking. The spike protein seems to be the most problematic part of the virus when it comes to immune responses. The cytokine storm, when we had severe COVID, was almost certainly related to immune dysregulation connected to the spike protein. Okay? Now, the purpose of doing the vaccination was to reduce the risk of severe COVID 19. It's important to remember that. And it did a good job at reducing severe COVID 19 in a high risk individual. And at that time, I would have accepted some complications if it reduced the pressure on the system. But in my view, the mistake they made is that they then went and vaccinated the low risk cohort and people who had already been infected. Did that skew their immune system so that they were less effective at stopping circulation of the virus? Because if you have a whole population who has been exposed with natural mucosal immunity, it's not that they can't get infected. It's just that the virus will struggle to efficiently spread to other people if it's being shut down very quickly in the upper airway. Now, one of the other problems is the fact that Omicron tends to prefer the sinuses, not just the upper airway in terms of the nose and the back of the throat. It has a predilection for replicating in the sinuses. That is like one of the hardest areas to reach in terms of the immune system. You really have to have good mucosal immunity. And so in situations where you don't, what I think we have are a number of people who just never clear the virus. And this is what I'm talking about. Look at the image again. That trough never goes down to zero because this cohort here is almost always infected and circulating it. And in highly vaccinated regions, you just have this endless loop of infection. So, the final point. So, what if people still are getting infected? Now, remember what I said. Everything is about preventing the spike protein getting into the bloodstream. Because once it gets there and it starts binding to proteins lining blood vessels, binding to proteins on different parts of the body. That's where the immune system targeting the spike protein can cause serious damage. What happens if this keeps on happening over and over again? What are the implications to the blood vessels? Does it accelerate certain conditions? And based on what I had said before, the Carterson study looked at the fact that the blood vessels get stiffer in the period of time months after somebody has been infected. That's just one thing. There's so many other cells that are being targeted when the virus is circulating through the bloodstream. This, in my view, of the infection, reinfection, after reinfection, after reinfection in a population whose immune system is already primed is, in my view, the worst outcome we could have ever asked for. Because it means now you're not getting to herd immunity. They will never acknowledge what Gert was saying at the beginning, where he said, you are going to drive all these viral variants, you'll just never stop it, by interfering in the pandemic in the way that it did. They'll never acknowledge it. It seems as though they would rather to go to their graves being considered right, no matter what implications happen to the population at large. I think that that's probably the worst part that I've seen. That, in effect, what should be happening now, and you're seeing it even in terms of the COVID inquiry in the UK, they are acknowledging the problems with lockdown. And they're saying, oh, yeah, we made a mistake here. We didn't do this, or we did too much of that. An apology is okay, but in this context, we don't need an apology 5 years down the line when so many people are sick. We just need the research to be done to work out what in the world are the implications to people who have been vaccinated and boosted and keep getting reinfected. What happens to their physiology? What about their pathology? Does it accelerate other conditions? We need to know, because if we know, at least we can mitigate it. An apology 10 years down the line is not going to help anyone at this point. In time, I will demonstrate with more evidence in terms of what's happening in terms of deaths. People will tell you excess deaths are fine. I will show you why I know that is not right at a later date. But the point is that we have serious challenges ahead of us. All you can do is raise awareness. Let people do whatever they can to try and protect themselves from reinfection after reinfection. One of the simplest strategies coming into the winter and Christmas period, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, expect a super spreader event after Christmas. In the USA, expect it after Thanksgiving. This has just happened. And so therefore, you need to reduce your risk and your exposure. This is why I created Humming Heroes. Simple, science-based, learn to hum, protect your sinuses with nitric oxide, share it with family and friends. Simplest, most effective strategy you can do. The only cost is to buy the book. And to be frank with you, the link gives you a free black and white PDF version if you really don't even want to contribute to it. There is no excuse for not knowing what you can do and not sharing it with those who will benefit. So thank you again. We will continue to try and analyze and explain what is happening around us, because it doesn't seem anyone else can or is interested to do the same. Have a great evening.
A hero, an immune adventure. Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.